the In Between Fantasy Football Podcast, Season 4. Let's go, baby. Yeah. There was a time I had trouble talking about it. Congratulate them, we know they doubted. Somehow we made it up out the pit, back against the wall, never quit. Traversing through each obstacle, show a non-believer what's possible. Let nothing they could do stand in between me and my wildest dreams. Let's go. Nothing that come at us could come in between. Life gave me the worst, yet my side grew so green. We've been down in the dirt, been tossed in the trash, but I never strayed from my path. When we're gone, we ain't looking back.
Maybe we were all way too high. Maybe that's our fault.
It's going to be a crazy time, but it's going to be a fun time.
Life is boring if you don't take some chances and do some things outside of the box.
Your destination for both some feel-good lifestyle advice and some fantasy football advice. All right. The NFL kicks off in less than 48 hours. Tonight on the In Between Fantasy Football Podcast, we are talking injury pivots, waiver wires, and NFL future bets. Tonight, to do that, guys, we have a very special cast for you. We have chef, real estate agent, father, husband, and fantasy football analyst, Nathan Polvote, and he's also joined by construction manager by day, viral tweeter by night, Scott Reinier. Gentlemen, how are we doing? It is week 1, baby.
I'm excited, man. I'm super excited. People have been tweeting it all day. Like, it's finally, we're done with the takes. We're done with the projections. It's time to figure out who we're going to start, figure out who we're going to sit, figure out who we're going to pick up on waivers. It's what we all love to do. It's been a long off season, and I'm really excited for the stats to start piling up.
Yeah, I'm with you, Scott. It has been a long off season, and as 3 people who wrote Dynasty content for most of the off season, it kind of wets your whistle, but there's nothing like real football and getting into redraft season. I am just ready to go. Like, I'm ready to write about things that are actually happening, not guessing. Like, let's go. It's time. It's football season. I mean,
so much is on the line this year, guys, not just for us as fantasy analysts, as fantasy managers, bettors, but also just these NFL teams, man. This was a wild offseason, enormous trades, controversy around every corner, whether it's Stephen Ross, Deshaun Watson, and everything that happened. It was absolutely an incredible offseason, but we are now here. We are now here with football. And guys, before we get started tonight, again, we're going to go through injury pivots, waivers, and NFL futures. We just kind of want to let you know what's going on here at the site this time of year. We have a chocked full schedule. We are back to 7 days a week content. You can check that out on our Twitter, on our Facebook, Instagram. We posted our weekly schedule. We are chocked full. Not only do we have this fantasy football podcast live stream on Tuesday nights, we are also going to be back with you at 1:30 p.m. on Friday afternoons. Nate and I, we're going to have a variety of guests. It's going to be quick pace. We're going to talk Thursday night football. We're going to talk more injuries. We're going to talk weekly start sits. It's going to be a lot of fun. We already got some really great guests lined up. So, Nate, I'm absolutely thrilled to be back with you 2 days a week on the In Between Fantasy Football Podcast moving forward here, my friend.
yeah, I'm stoked for that day slot. We're going to be able to get a lot of information out quickly, a little bit different format than we've done before. It's going to be a good time, though. We've got some great guests lined up that I'm very excited for. Hopefully, we've got a few more coming on. We're working on it, but it's going to be great. And it's going to be great information for setting your lineups on Saturday and Sunday.
Yeah, and guys, a reminder, you can catch us here on the In Between Fantasy Football Podcast Tuesday nights. Scott will be with us on Tuesday nights, or Jen, Nate's wife. They rotate back and forth. So you see Scott this week, week 2, Jen will be with us. If this is your first time tuning into the In Between Fantasy Football Podcast, please hit that subscribe button. We have not just this show, we just mentioned our Friday show as well. And then on Sunday mornings as well, Connor Coughlin and I, we have Bo McBrayer, Kelly's going to be popping in. We're going to be doing the tailgate, not just DFS this year. We're also doing some betting advice to help you guys make the most of this season. So guys, I'm super thrilled with everything we have coming down the pipeline at IBT, but we have a loaded, jam-packed show. So let's go ahead and jump into front and center.
Sometimes taking that first step out the door is the hardest thing to do. Give it a chance, you'll be begging for more. me. How about you come to the place we can have some fun? Ain't gotta worry about knowing not what it means. You come and give me another, cause the night is young. At least I so thought.
This just in. Breaking news. Front and center.
All right. Before we jump into front and center, just want to give a shout out to the IBT family. We got some loyalists in here. Albert, Brad, appreciate you guys tuning in tonight. Everyone else as well. But guys, we want to give you quick information here. What should you be doing with this news? Because it might change in a couple of days. We're not 100% sure, but we do want to give you some actionable advice. And let's start in Green Bay. Allen Lazard, his status for week 1 is officially up in the air. This kind of came out of nowhere, fellas. Everything looked pretty good for Allen Lazard to slot in as the Packers' #1 wide receiver. Not so fast, we're hearing now. Scott, how do you take this news, and do you have any pivot plays, whether that's on the Packers or somewhere else in the NFL?
Well, I'll start with, me personally, I hope this isn't necessarily a big problem for you on your fantasy team. And that's because personally I have Allen Lazard as a wide receiver 3 in my rankings. So not necessarily a surefire starter. But I know there were plenty of drafts where he was taken. It's appealing, #1 receiver with Aaron Rodgers. So I imagine this is going to hurt quite a few teams. I'm not super comfortable pivoting to another receiver on the Packers. Both Watkins and Dobbs are they're very risky. They're both wait and see for me. See what happens, see how this wide receiver pecking order shakes out. So I'm probably trying to pivot elsewhere. I have a rookie wide receiver coming up later that I'll talk more about at that time.
Yep.
It could potentially be a pivot point. It really just depends on the size of your league and how scoured your waiver wire is. But I'm probably at least starting by looking elsewhere away from the Packers.
Nate, what does this do for Aaron Jones and your confidence in him as well as A.J. Dillon? Obviously, they're probably in your lineups already, but does this give you more confidence knowing that even if Lazard's out there, he might not be 100%?
Of course, obviously, you're taking away one dynamic option from a dynamic quarterback. We've seen A.J. Dillon and Aaron Jones both get receiving work. I think they probably get a slight bump if Lazard isn't 100%. But the thing that we're not talking about is, first of all, it's week 1, Sammy Watkins. It's week 1. Why couldn't he pop off? Why couldn't he be a 1-week waiver wire ad? I think his rostership is very low. But 2, don't forget that Randall Cobb is on this team and is an old favorite of Aaron Rodgers. And don't think that in a pinch he won't go to Cobb because he doesn't have Devontae Adams or Allen Lazard.
It sounds like to me, kind of hearing both of this from you guys, is that maybe there isn't a clear option here in the Packers receiving room. And this early in the season, you probably have a better option elsewhere.
Absolutely.
Maybe consider throwing out like an anytime touchdown score on someone like Sammy Watkins, Nate's saying, possibly if you're going to be doing some betting this weekend. So something to consider. There's probably some value out there in the betting scene, but as far as fantasy football lineups go for week 1, if Allen Lazard's out, it sounds like we're out on the Packers offense, at least their receivers here.
Yeah, I agree. You brought up a very good point. Like in week 1, you shouldn't, having to pivot to somebody like Cobb or Watkins is more of like a mid-season type move, I would think, where you're that stuck.
Right.
Yes.
Some people that came to my mind while Nate was talking is, if you drafted like a Sky Moore or a George Pickens, who you're not really sure you want to start over someone like Lazard. Well, now that if Lazard's out, I would be fine throwing one of those guys in there, just with the high upside, immense talent with Pickens, Chiefs offense with Sky Moore. Those would be 2 names I would consider. But you likely have somebody on your bench that you can throw in there after having just drafted your team.
Okay. Fair enough, gentlemen. Let's move forward here. Some good injury news for the Falcons. Drake London, he returned to practice earlier this week. He's been banged up throughout the preseason. My advice for Drake London, guys, it's pretty simple. I'm got to bench him here in week 1. He's going up against Marcus Lattimore in a tough Saints matchup here. Unless I'm in a pinch, I don't think I want to put London in here in week 1. Nate, are you opposed to that decision?
No, I wouldn't have been anyway. There's too much unknown in Atlanta, and it's really hard to really want to be a part of this receiving core for any reason, whether that's fantasy or prop bets, anything. There's just so much I'm unsure about with this team. We don't know what Marcus Mariota is going to be. We don't know how good this line is going to be. We don't even know who the running back's going to be, really. We know we've got Algier. We know we've got Cordell Patterson, but who's it going to be? There's too much uncertainty in Atlanta to really be able to trust them in any facet.
Probably the only people in my lineups this week. And Scott, I know you got to start Kyle Pitts because you've obviously invested in him heavily. Cordell Patterson's someone that I probably, if I have to, I'll throw out in some deeper league lineups as well. But Nate, I think that's good advice in general. We should probably be staying away from Atlanta this week.
Except for Kyle Pitts, but I mean, that's kind of a given. You're going to start Kyle Pitts. With where you drafted him, you're starting him every week.
Yeah, so I mean, the way I see it, it depends. I mean, where Drake London is going in drafts, if you went heavy RB, he could be your wide receiver too. If you waited on wide receiver, if you're looking at potentially starting him in your flex, I'm probably shying away. And for me, it's a little bit more based on the matchup. His first game as a rookie. Yeah. But for me, there is a lot of uncertainty in Atlanta, but I think there are two things that are fairly certain. When London and Pitts are healthy, they are going to dominate the target volume. So I don't really think that's an unknown. I mean, what Drake London will do with it, how successful he'll be, that's, obviously that's still a question.
Right. And that's more what I'm speaking to. I know the volume's going to be there. It's what he can do with it, but.
All right, guys. Well, some other positive injury news for us as well. Jaylen Waddle, he's returning to practice. And I think this is a surefire start. Obviously, if you drafted him, you're likely playing him. But I think you should have some confidence, even though he's coming off that injury. He's going up against the New England Patriots here in week 1. No J.C. Jackson in that Patriots cornerback room for the first time in a while. He's likely going to see Jonathan Jones, a cornerback who's been around New England for a long time, but coming off a pretty serious injury last season. So with Jones just coming back off injury himself, I'm full send on Jaylen Waddle here. He's a top 24 play for me.
Agreed. Yeah, I mean, Waddle has to be a top 24 play in this offense because he's going to see volume even with Tyreek Hill there. I mean, that's just kind of like end of story. They have no really running game. So,
yeah, and I mean, the Dolphins notoriously, at least recently, give the Patriots fits. And so,
yes, sir.
And I mentioned it, I think, last podcast, based on the projections I've done for fantasy matchups this year, taking into consideration all the different factors, I'm not really that worried or scared of the Patriots defense as I would have been in the past, especially for the passing game. Mm-hmm. They've been fairly generous to the running game, more so than the passing game the last few years, but they're not like the worst team in the league, but they're not just this sit everyone against the Patriots this year for me. So Waddle's a no-brainer start.
And with everything we've seen thus far from the New England offense in the preseason, they could have some extra possessions due to the Patriots stalling out. We don't even know who's calling plays really there in New England quite yet. So, Dolphins might be an attractive one to bet the money line here in week 1 as well.
I'd take that bet. I probably will take that bet.
Is it in New England or in Miami? You guys know?
I think it is in New England, but I honestly don't know 100%. That's why we normally have Kyle here. Kyle's not on the back end tonight, but guys, let's move forward here. Someone can figure that out for you, Scott. Next headline here, Chris Godwin. He shed his knee brace this week. For me, guys, it's simple. If Chris Godwin goes, he goes in my lineup here for me in week 1. I know he's coming off the ACL. We know what our guy Deepak has been saying about players coming off the ACL early in their seasons. However, this is a game I want to be a part of. I want to be a part of the Cowboys' revenge game against the Buccaneers from week 1 last year. This is going to be a high point total. It's going to be a high-scoring game, and Godwin's going to see some type of volume if he's in it.
Yeah, I mean, of course he's going to see some volume. I had, when I read this on the show sheet, Godwin sheds knee brace, I had this image of my head of Forrest Gump when he was a kid shedding those knee braces. It's like, okay, all right, I love him. I think that Godwin's going to be impactful. He's younger. We've seen him come back from injuries quickly in the past. He might be a little slow out of the gate, but who's going to take targets from him? Russell Gage? We know who Brady's going to throw to. And Brady's a different kind of quarterback. He elevates players even when they're hurt. So Godwin's a smash for me. I mean, it's not even a question.
So for me, I mean, I agree for the most part, but the only reason why you could have an out if you're concerned, because everybody thought he was going to start the season on the pup, he didn't, and then there was some talk about, well, they didn't put him on the pup because they want to have him available before those 4 weeks are up.
Correct.
But he might not be 100% in week 1, and the only reason that you could get away with benching him in week 1 is because of where his cost was in drafts. I picked up Godwin wherever I possibly could because of how late he was going because of this injury concern. So what I mean by that is, week 1, the guy you draft as your wide receiver 1 or 2, you shouldn't consider sitting them ever. But Godwin could be your wide receiver 3. Yep. So I'm just saying, if you do have better options and you're concerned about that injury, you can get away with it. I personally am in the same mindset as Nate. Thank you, Brad. Same mindset as Nate. I'm rolling him out there.
Okay. Last one here on the injury front for you guys. James Robinson, likely active for week 1. He's coming off the Achilles tear. Scott, you were pretty vocal about your opinion in the group message earlier when we kind of talked about this news. Are you interested in him at all? Are you leaving him on the bench? And then, Nate, I would love to hear your opinion on Travis Etienne, because I know we've all kind of gone back and forth on what we think of him as well.
Yeah. So for me, and this, I'm higher on the Etienne side, I think, compared to most of us here. But for me, this doesn't really have all that much to do with Etienne. I'm not touching James Robinson in week 1. I have no idea what his role is going to be. He's coming off an Achilles. Our most recent example of someone coming back early from an Achilles injury was Cam Akers, and his first few games back, he was not very good. And then you add to that, it's not like they just have scrubs to play if Robinson isn't a full go. They have Travis Etienne, so there's no way I'm starting James Robinson week 1.
Okay. Nate, are you concerned at all with Etienne, or are you still rolling him out there as an RB2 this week?
I mean, as an RB2, yeah, I'm fine with it. I really don't think that we're going to see much of James Robinson. It doesn't make sense, man. I mean, the guy's ancient, right? He's 24 years old now.
Right.
It takes forever to heal from an Achilles at that age when you've gotten so old. But, really, why would they roll him out when they've got Etienne? They can take their time with him. It's not that he's going to be a non-entity with Etienne in this offense. But I'm also concerned about Etienne because we forget he's coming off of Lisfranc surgery. That is not an easy recovery. And he's looked decent in practice. We haven't seen a lot of live action in games. And when he's healthy, I love Etienne especially because of the matchup with Trevor Lawrence. Who doesn't love that? They know each other from college. It's good for Lawrence. I just don't think he's 100% until week 4 or 5, probably. About the same time that we see James Robinson getting closer to maybe 85 to 90%, and this offense will start to click. Until then, I'm cautious, but as a RB2, I'll roll it out.
I think you're a little low on Etienne, Nate, and I think specifically I'm looking here at the matchup. And again, this is a different Washington defense than we saw last season. However, this defense did give up the most receiving touchdowns to running backs last year. So I think maybe Etienne can find his way into pay dirt here in his regular season debut. I also like him as anytime touchdown score, plus 220 right now. Etienne against this Washington football team, the Commanders now, but yeah, I'm a little bit with Scott. I think I'm a little higher on Etienne, but I think it's not wheels up for James Robinson quite yet. I think we're going to wait and see. We should probably have better options here in week 1.
Oh, you really better.
All right, guys, let's go ahead and move forward, though, to our next segment of the show. We're going to talk a little bit about NFL future bets. And if you're not into betting, don't worry. This can also apply to fantasy football, whether you still have some drafts going or whether you're just looking for some guys out on the waiver wire as well. So let's go ahead and jump into headline hijinks. Everybody's mind heading into the season. Who is going to the Super Bowl? Who will be the 2 teams slugging it out in February this season? Nate, last year, We did this right before the playoffs. You called the Bengals. You liked them. You took the favorites. You took the long odds on them. So good on you for that. What do you have this time around? What is your headline heading into the season for who you think is going to be in the Super Bowl and possibly win it?
So the headline's going to be mile high on the Broncos because the Broncos are going to and winning the Super Bowl. And here's why. Russell Wilson is about to have a career season. Do you remember Peyton Manning's first season in Denver?
Yes,
55 touchdowns because ball flies when you're playing your home games.
I remember his first season in Denver.
Yeah, I know you do. I remember that Super Bowl. No, that wasn't his first season in Denver. That was his second season.
Oh, okay.
His first season in Denver, he lost to Joe Flacco in the divisional round. Yes. This is going to be much like Peyton Manning. Now, it can be up for debate as to whether or not Russell Wilson is a caliber of quarterback long-term at the end of their career as Peyton Manning. But I think we could see him come in and throw 45, 50 touchdowns, approach 5,000 yards, minimal interceptions. This is an offense.
A lot of touchdowns, bud.
Dude, Manning threw 55 that season.
Did he really throw 55 touchdowns?
He threw 55 touchdowns that season. He threw for over 5,000 yards. They were both single-season records at the time. I'm telling you that Russell Wilson can come here and at altitude have that kind of season. The ball flies. He's going to be able to throw it farther. He's going to be able to air it out more to guys like Courtland Sutton and Jerry Jeudy. This is science. He's going to have a career year, and this Broncos team is going to be almost unstoppable coming out of a very difficult division.
Well, Nate, I do agree with you on this one. My headline is also Colorado high on the Broncos. I'm right there with you. Plus 1,800. I think that's still some value there. A little bit higher, better odds earlier in the summer. But right now, as they sit, it's pretty good. I like them against the Bucs in the Super Bowl to make it to the Super Bowl. The Broncos have plus 900 odds to come out of the AFC. So I like that. I think that's a pretty nice bet for me. Kind of a slim odds for the Bucs to make it out of the NFC, plus 330. So I might be, as much as I think the Bucs could make it out of the NFC, and I think they're the favorite too. There's still the Rams, there's still the Packers. So I probably wouldn't bet that quite yet, but I definitely will take these long odds on the Broncos to win the Super Bowl as well as to get out of the AFC. Scott, who is your Super Bowl prediction here?
So I'm not quite as high on just Russell Wilson comes in and just automatically has a career year, takes the Broncos rolling through the Super Bowl. Because I've seen Russell Wilson over the last, and I'm not saying that he's done. I don't think he's going to come in and throw for 45 touchdowns and 5,000 yards. I don't think that's going to happen with how much they run it. And another reason why I don't really pick the Broncos is because it's going to be really, really tough for them to, let's say, get a first-round bye in that division. And that first-round bye is such a huge part of making it far in the playoffs. And I think a team that has a very good chance to get a first-round bye is my AFC representative, and that's the Buffalo Bills. My headline for this is the ghost of Scott Norwood is finally put to rest. I think this is the year. I watched that Super Bowl. I watched that, and I was rooting for the Bills. And I think this is the year that the Bills finally get their trophy. As far as the NFC goes, I'm going with a little bit of a dark horse here, not the highest odds. And if this does happen, their fan base will be absolutely insufferable. But yes, it's the Philadelphia Eagles.
Please no.
I was bouncing back and forth between the Philadelphia Eagles and the 49ers because I'm a Trey Lance believer. I think he's going to take the next step this year, and I think they're going to be tough to beat. By the way, my headline for if I picked the Niners, I just have to say it because it's so bad. If it was Bills Niners, it was going to be where there's a Bill, there's a Trey.
Okay. Okay.
Cool. I just had to get that out. Anyway, I'm going. The NFC I think is more wide open. The Rams are strong, the Bucs are strong, just like years past. Packers lost a big weapon, but they have a really good defense. So all those teams will be right there. But I'm going with the dark horse pick. I'm going with the Eagles.
I like that, Scott, honestly. And their odds to get to the Super Bowl, I don't have them in front of me, but they were very generous too, I thought. So that's one that I might even be putting, just a little sprinkle on. Probably not a full unit of my betting carousel, but definitely a little sprinkle on the Eagles to make out of the NFC. I do like that one. I think Jalen Hurts will take that next step as well, Scott.
You guys are crazy, but okay.
What's crazy is Russell throwing for 45 and 5,000.
We're all a little bit crazy. It's what makes this show fun,
heavy,
guys.
On a run heavy team. I know. We always debate things. It's great.
So moving forward here, I do want to talk about the NFL MVP. It has been, really an award for quarterbacks the last couple years here. And I'm going to go with, for my headline, don't fix what ain't broke, but maybe try ayahuasca. Aaron Rodgers, plus 1,000, baby. I just think Rodgers is going to get it done. He's a talented quarterback. He had a great offseason getting away from the game a little bit. And now the votes are going to be more in his favor than ever. He doesn't have Devontae Adams. So if Rodgers can go out there and have a similar season, or, at least 95% of what he's had the last 2 years, there's a good shot he's winning this award. And I think at plus 1,000 behind a lot of other people, that's some good odds that I'm willing to invest in.
Yeah, I think honestly, any given year, you could take the MVP trophy and at the start of the season, you could put two names in it: Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers, and it's theirs to lose. I just think that's the way it is. But I agree. I think Aaron Rodgers, especially if he's lost Devontae Adams and he still takes them deep into the playoffs, why wouldn't he get the MVP?
Yep.
My particular MVP is it's a youngster, relatively speaking, but it's Justin Herbert. And my headline for this is Herbie Goes Bananas, which is not a unique or original headline with Justin Herbert, but I think it fits this year. I think he's going to go nuts this year. He already basically went nuts last year, but with the weapons he has, the healthy offense he has, the defense is pretty good, but not good enough to stop some of those high-flying, high-scoring games in the AFC
Correct.
West. So I think he nudges out the veterans this year and takes home that MVP.
That wouldn't be that surprising to me as someone who obviously is an AFC West fan, has watched Justin Herbert. And I think that defense is better than you're giving it credit for. I think we're going to be surprised down the line how good they actually are with Bosa. They got JC Jackson. I'm interested to see what they're doing. Yeah. Yep. I think this could be a much improved defense, and I don't think we're giving them enough credit. That said, I'm picking Russell Wilson because, again, if I think the dude's going to come out and throw 45 touchdowns and throw for almost 5,000 yards, I kind of have to pick him as my MVP candidate. Plus 1,400 right now. I mean, that's a pretty solid money line. You can make some money with an inexpensive bet. You can put $3, $4, $5 on it. Feel good about your return. If you've got more cash, it's an even better bet if you're willing to lose it. My headline is Russ cooks up MVP in Denver.
Okay. Nate, I like it personally just because I have so much invested in Russell Wilson across a lot of teams. I've actually kind of been reaching a little bit more for him than I would a normal quarterback, but I definitely do see a very high caliber year for him. Not quite the Peyton Manning of what was that, 2014, 2015 maybe. But I still think it's going to be a really good year for Russell Wilson. So I will back you there. And let's go ahead and move forward to our next award here, guys. The Comeback Player of the Year. This is a really fun one. And I mean, it's always one that this is like, we don't know who this is going to go to. Sometimes it is a quarterback award. A lot of people are liking Mitch Trubisky for this. But Scott, who are you going with for the Comeback Player of the Year for 2022?
So for this one also, I'm not going with a super obvious name, but I think it's somebody who could very well win this award, and that's Robert Woods, wide receiver, Tennessee Titans. He was off to a strong start last year. I mean, obviously Cooper Kupp did what he did, but I mean, if you look at what Robert Woods was doing before he tore his ACL, it was solid, and I think he still has that in him. And it was mid-season, so I think he's fully healthy from that injury. And as far as I'm concerned, he's going to start out the year as the Titans' number one wide receiver. I mean, Treylon Burks, very talented receiver, but I think Robert Woods is the veteran, savvy route runner, first, guy that picks up first downs, good third down receiver. I think Tannehill is going to favor Robert Woods, and if he stays healthy all year, I think he could still put up over 100 plus targets, 1,000 plus yards. I don't know, 6, 7, 8 touchdowns, and take home Comeback Player of the Year. Plus, he was my all-in last year preseason, so I want to tie this in a nice little bow.
Storylines for Scott that he's hoping for. Robert Woods, hey, plus 5,000, man. That's some really good odds on him. So
yeah, it is.
if you are a little confident in him, that might not be a bad one to sprinkle on. But Nate, you are taking one of the favorites for this award. Why don't you take it away with your headline?
So my headline is Football Jesus Returns. Can you guess who I'm talking about? It's Christian McCaffrey.
Not Tim Tebow, right?
Not Tim Tebow. No, not Tim Tebow. Not Tim Tebow. Oh, Nick Jones does have him as his overall tight end 2 for the 2022 season. So let's just note that. Christian McCaffrey, look, if he can come back and play a full season, we know exactly what we're probably going to get. We're going to get 1,000+ yards rushing. We're going to get 1,000+ yards receiving. We're going to get 20-something touchdowns because when he is on the field, he is the best player on the field in any game. Doesn't matter who they're playing. Doesn't matter. If he stays on the field, it's easy. That's why he's the favorite. But Robert Woods, I could see that. I could see that too.
Derrick Henry is actually the odds-on favorite, I think, at plus 550, but CMC, I think, is top 3 in odds. So,
but here's my question. Should Derrick Henry qualify, though?
That's what I was thinking, too.
He didn't. He only missed, 5 games?
Yeah.
6 games?
I also
He can't possibly qualify.
No, he missed 10 games.
No.
I think it was 8. I think he missed 9. I think he played 8 games. I know he played 8. So, I think he was out 9 games,
I think he played 8, so he missed more than half the season.
Still,
though. He came back and played in the playoffs.
If you bring that, Robert Woods didn't play that many fewer games than Derrick Henry. So,
that's true.
Well,
that's true.
I will put someone out there who played more games than both of those players, and that is we are trusting the Giants. Saquon Barkley plus 1,600. And this isn't just a story of injury. Of course, Saquon was banged up in 2019. He was banged up in 2020 again, missed that whole season pretty much with the ACL tear. But he was back last season, and he just didn't perform. However, I think if there's one guy who can correct this ship here in New York, it's Brian Daboll. I think Saquon is going to be the spark plug to this offense. He's going to be the guy to open things up for him. I think Daboll knows what he has in Saquon. Saquon's contract's getting up there, so I think if they're going to use the crap out of him, it's going to be this season. So I'm in on Saquon Barkley. The only thing holding me back on this bet a little bit is how good are the Giants really going to be because, Daniel Jones is Daniel Jones.
He's not good.
Yeah, I love both your picks. And honestly, CMC would have been my pick, but I wanted to not double up. But it's kind of insane that, honestly, that we have two players of Barkley and CMC's caliber. If they both stay healthy, it's going to be interesting to see, you know what I mean, who potentially gets the comeback player because – and I'll tell you, I've got these two stacked on probably 3 or 4 teams.
Well, keep in mind, these are the 2018 RB1 and RB2 in finishing too. So, these were the studs just a couple years ago. And obviously, I don't think that it's a Todd Gurley situation where we see them out of the league in a couple years, but they have a lot to prove, man. Both of them in their own respect. McCaffrey got paid and he hasn't lived up to that contract due to injury. And Saquon, he's playing for his next contract now. So it all begins here real shortly. But let's go ahead and round this out, guys, with our discussion of Offensive Rookie of the Year. And it is I don't think it's any secret who I'm going to go with here. And that is Breece Hall. This should be a Breece plus 1,000 for Breece Hall. And, I think there's one other guy that Scott's probably going to highlight here coming up that I think could win this. I just think Breece Hall, I have him in enough places that I've invested heavily enough to the point where I believe in him. Michael Carter's a solid back, but I think the circumstances are, easy enough for Breece Hall, a high caliber player like him who's had so many touchdowns over the last couple of years, at a good school, faced high competition. I think he's going to make the Jets frisky, in my opinion, and win this award.
And I'm with you. I think he's going to win the award because I think he's going to be the most used of the offensive rookies that we're going to see, and he's probably going to have the best stats. I think you were looking at more of a Javonte Williams, Melvin Gordon situation last year than anybody's really realizing because I think we all thought that Javonte Williams was going to be the bell cow in Denver. And here comes Melvin Gordon going 50-50. And I think Breece Hall will get more. And we're probably looking at like a 60-40 65-35 split here.
Tevin Coleman's out of the way now too, so I'm even more confident in him.
But I think that
he's
65% is enough for Breece Hall to eclipse 1,000 yards, have 7 to 10 touchdowns, and do enough to where we look at the end of the season like that was successful for Breece Hall. So this team isn't going to have much outside of its run game.
I put out there that, you know, looking back at the Jets' offensive running attempts the last couple of years, they fed Le'Veon Bell over 300 carries. They fed Frank Gore over 200 carries in his final season. So they've been feeding, guys like that who are old. Bilal Powell, who's a Jag. They've been feeding all these guys. Now they finally have Breece Hall, a young, dynamic running back in there. I'm not worried about Michael Carter. I'm firing up Breece Hall here in week 1. Mm-hmm. I'm going to ride him the whole way to fantasy football championships this year. I'm confident in that. Scott, I would love to hear your opinion on me hyping up Breece Hall and who your offensive rookie of the year is as well.
First of all, yeah, I think Breece Hall has a just as good of a path to rookie of the year as any. And again, it's because I think he's going to get the volume. There's been that typical late preseason. It almost seems like we grasp for negative stuff on some of these guys. And Nate said it, in my projections, which I just finished finally, woohoo! I have it at about a 60-40 split, but that's still 1,200 scrimmage yards for Breece, about 8 or 9 touchdowns and right around RB 16. That's where I have Breece. So, I think if a rookie puts up that type of season, then, I think he's definitely going to be the top rookie fantasy point scorer in the running back group this year. So it'll just depend on whether or not that goes to the top running back or potentially wide receiver. I'm going with the wide receiver. Again, I wanted to spice it up and put some different players in here. And I'm going with one of my favorite rookie flyers, and that's George Pickens, Pittsburgh Steelers. I know their quarterback situation is not ideal, but I've liked Pickens since long before when I very first started studying rookies at the start of the offseason. Pickens jumped out to me. And, he fell a bit because of the timing of his injury. He's also he's got some maturity issues as well. But I think he could, he's arguably one of the more talented receivers to come out of this class. And I think he marches into Pittsburgh and is immediately a starter. I think he showed that in the preseason. He plays with physicality, and he just plays with a touch and a talent that just it's you don't see it very often. So yep. I really don't care who the quarterback is in Pittsburgh. If it's Trubisky all season, if Trubisky gives way to Pickett, it's never going to be Mason Rudolph. I don't really care. I think Pickens could be the top scoring rookie wide receiver.
Well, and something to keep in mind too, Chase Claypool's been banged up almost the entire preseason. So Pickens has gotten a lot of valuable reps with that number 1 team. Scott, I love it here. I would be lying if I didn't say I have already not bet George Pickens. I know I also said I'm in on Breece Hall winning this award, but I think it's going to be one of these two here.
Real quick, just something I read recently is the Pittsburgh could very well put Claypool in the slot. He's a big slot guy. He's like a Juju size slot guy, but they could put him in the slot, and it's Pickens and Deontay in 2 wide receiver sets.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to what GP can do. All the reports about this kid is that he is a dog. So I think he's going to continue to be a dog. And I like this bet a lot here, Scott. I've been reaching for Pickens in my drafts this week. I've had a couple of drafts today. I think I reached as high as the 8th or 9th round for him just because, we have to adjust here. And I think Pickens is a great example of adjusting to maybe it's off-season hype. Maybe it's preseason hype, but to me, it sounds like glowing reports. I've seen it in games, and I think we're going to see it in the regular season as well. So, guys, let's go ahead. We're going to talk waiver wires and some free agent fines here in the scope.
I have the targets on my sights.
Requesting permission to engage.
In the scope.
All right, in the scope, this is our waivers a week early section. And we also have an article coming out about this tomorrow on the website as well, if you want to check out more in-depth knowledge of what we're thinking about with these in the scope candidates here. First, I want to go through some of the consensus pickups that waivers are running tonight. If you're watching live, you can probably grab them for very little to no fab, these guys still. But these are kind of the consensus ads out there. Rex Burkhead for the Houston Texans. No Marlon Mack. He's rostered in 15.8% of ESPN leagues. Mike Davis. He is another one that people are getting hot on right now. Running back for the Baltimore Ravens, 10.2% rostered in ESPN leagues. He could see some work this week. No Gus Edwards, J.K. Dobbins, we're not sure on quite yet. Isaiah McKenzie back at Bills training camp, or excuse me, I guess what is it now? What do I call it now? Facility. I don't even know
team
what
facilities.
Yeah, I don't even like how like
team headquarters, team facilities.
Yeah, I mean
team
like
practice field, whatever.
Yeah,
we know.
Yeah, Isaiah McKenzie, he's back with the Bills, though. He's healthy, 14.5% rostered. He's going to be the starting slot receiver for the Bills here in week 1. It looks like Jameson Crowder is going to take a back seat to McKenzie. He could be very, very appealing. We've seen Cole Beasley do great things in this role, and McKenzie looks like he's a more explosive player at this point in his career. And then this is a pivot that I want to talk about earlier, and I didn't really get the chance to. That's AJ Green for the Cardinals, 9.9% rostered, and why I think we need to pay attention to AJ Green this week. Why I think you should go right now, you probably don't need to use any fab on him, honestly, or your priority. But at the end of the day, this is going to be one of the most shootout games of the weekend here. You look at the over-under lines Vegas has set. Chiefs and Cardinals are set to go off here in Glendale. 9.9% rostered, though, and this is a team without DeAndre Hopkins, so I think if you need someone who could come down with a touchdown, it could be AJ Green. We don't know if Rondale's healthy, too. Rondale's kind of been battling something a little bit, so I think if you have an Allen Lazard situation, if you have a Chris Godwin situation that you're not sure of, and you just need a 1-week play, I don't think AJ Green's going to be relevant the rest of the season, but if you need a 1-week guy, it might be AJ Green, the grizzled veteran, baby.
Well, and keep in mind also, I mean, Zach Ertz isn't a sure thing to play or be 100%. With the calf issue he's had all preseason. So their pass catchers could be depleted. I agree. I mean, again, hopefully you don't need an AJ Green dart.
I might be ripping him out in a couple leagues over. Again,
but, there's plenty of leagues where you have 2 or 3 flexes. You know what I mean? And if you're looking at like AJ Green or some other wide receiver 3-4. He might have more upside in that environment, in that game.
Agreed. So, guys, let's go ahead. Let's break out our in the scope candidates here. Let's talk about who we're thinking that tomorrow after waivers run, you can go and pick up on the cheap here. Nate, why don't you go ahead first with yours?
So I really never saw this happening in my life. Things change. Life gets weird. I'm going to tell you about Kenyan Drake. He was released by Las Vegas a couple of weeks ago, caught on with Baltimore. It was notable because they released Tyler Batty to make room for him. Gus Edwards is on the PUP list. As you just mentioned, J.K. Dobbins hasn't looked 100%. You've got 2 marquee running backs coming off of major knee injuries and major repair surgeries in a really heavy running offense. So you go out and you get Kenyan Drake. I feel like Kenyan Drake, probably for the first 4 to 5 weeks of the season, is going to be a fairly relevant running back. This is a team that threw more than 45 or more than 50 or ran the ball more than 55% of the time in 2020 when Jackson was healthy for the entire season. They're going to be similar. Kenyan Drake, just on volume alone in this offense, should at least be relevant enough to be a cheap waiver wire pickup. I don't know that everybody else is on Mike Davis. I don't think it's Mike Davis. I mean, Mike Davis couldn't beat out Cordell Patterson in Atlanta.
Mike Davis has been there all offseason, though. I think that's the difference is why maybe people are gravitating towards him.
Sure, and I get that.
Do you just like Kenyan Drake more than Davis because he's a more talented player, in your opinion?
He's a more talented runner. He's got less miles on him. He's going to be more durable in that offense, and he's a little bit more dynamic. I mean, we know he's a talented pass catching back. Maybe he gets a little bit more involved in that aspect as well, something they haven't necessarily had in this offense because, I mean, Dobbins and Edwards aren't great pass catchers. So I don't know. We'll see what happens. I think he's the guy who – I don't think it's Mike Davis, though. I think that people are barking up the wrong tree with Davis. I think it's going to be Kenyan Drake. They wouldn't have gone out and signed him and let go of Batty if they were going to run with Mike Davis. Doesn't make sense. Why spend the money?
So I agree for the most part. This is a scenario I could see playing out. Since we're talking about beating the waiver wire, I think Drake's the one you want to get. I agree. Because I think week 1, it is going to be Mike Davis. And I think Seth said it. Kenyan Drake joined the team last week. Davis has been there all year, all off season. And I've even heard from a few different people who I trust, even if Dobbins suits up and plays, Davis will probably still get the majority of the work because Dobbins isn't quite ready yet. However, what I see happening is Davis potentially having a pretty good game. I mean, they start out against the Jets, you know.
Jets can be frisky, buddy. Easy.
All right. We'll see about that. But what I see potentially playing out is Mike Davis being one of those post week 1. Oh my God, he scored a touchdown or 2. Everybody spends all their fab on Mike Davis. But Kenyan Drake, I think, is, you know, however long, hypothetically, let's say Dobbins is out for a while. I know that's not the case, but I think after a couple of weeks, Drake takes over that role. And then once Dobbins is back, I think Drake's ahead of Mike Davis on the depth chart. And, you know, they hand it to more than just Dobbins. So I think Drake is the more sneaky, better long-term, beat the waiver wire stash. However, I do think week 1, I think Davis is a better play.
Okay.
I just worry. Here's my concern: is that with Mike Davis, he's just not that efficient of a running back. He had a couple of good weeks in Carolina, but I mean, honestly, if you're Greg Roman, don't you just run Lamar Jackson then?
You don't risk Lamar's health this early in the season.
I mean, I would just say, like me personally, I don't want to touch either.
The freshest he's going to be all year.
I don't want to touch.
This would be the week to run him more.
I made it very well known last year. I'm a Mike Davis fan at all. I had him. People were talking about him in Atlanta. Even then, I had him buried in my rankings. I just think if you're going to risk a Baltimore running back in week 1 specifically, I'd rather go with Davis just because Drake got there a week ago. That's the only – whether or not Davis will be effective, hopefully you're not in that scenario. I'm hoping Davis goes off so my league mates will spend all their fab on him.
Yeah, I'm with Scott here to close this argument out here. If I'm starting one of these running backs, hopefully I do not have to start a Baltimore running back.
Yeah, obviously.
Whether it's J.K. Dobbins, Mike Davis, Kenyan Drake. But I also do agree in the fact that I think long-term Drake could be a guy in this backfield. I mean, we saw Devonta Freeman. He was a guy we, continued to ride last season. Mm-hmm. And that was, in his older years. So I think Kenyan Drake at this point is probably just as good of a player as Devonta Freeman was last season, if not better. So I agree with you there. I would like to keep it here for my in the scope target. Also a member of the Baltimore Ravens here. And we've talked about him a couple times on this show. He was kind of the preseason hero for DFS lineups, betting, whatever you guys were doing this preseason. And that's Isaiah Likely. Right now, Likely is projected to be the 3rd receiving option in Baltimore. The Athletics' Jeff Zebrick wrote that he believes that Likely is the, quote, closest thing to an answer that the Ravens have as a 3rd receiving option. This is the same guy who went 12 for 12 during the preseason for 144 and 1. And I know like the whole argument for not wanting Likely is one, Mark Andrews there. Obviously, we've kind of talked about this in the past. Ravens do run more 3 tight end sets out of 22 personnel than any other team. And also, like last season, Rashad Bateman he was a 3rd option. And not that Likely is Rashad Bateman, but Bateman had 6 of his 12 games with double-digit fantasy points last season. So if you can get, 7-8 games of double-digit fantasy points from Isaiah Likely in your tight end position this year, I think it's worth a risk. At least pick him up right now, hold on to him for week 1. If he doesn't do anything, cut bait with him. But then we could see like a Dallas Goedert situation here where he still has a relevant year under one of the best tight ends in the league.
Yeah, so I like Likely. He's absolutely free in redraft. And the only thing is, I mean, it's tough to carry 2 tight ends this early in the season. So I'm only doing this if I waited on tight end, and I just have a whoever at tight end, like somebody in the tight end 15 to 20 range. That's my tight end 1, or tight end 12 to 20 range. You know what I mean? If I've got a locked and loaded tight end starter, I'm not going to utilize a bench spot resource on a tight end. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I completely understand that, Scott. I guess I have him rostered a couple places where I do have a surefire tight end. I think it's just the fact that week 1 comes out here, maybe a tight end gets banged up, and there's going to be a tight end needy team here soon. So whether that's you trading your locked and loaded tight end and riding likely this season, or vice versa, trading likely when his value hits that peak. We've seen wide receivers, we've seen tight ends go off in week 1 for the Ravens multiple times. So I'm holding my breath. I think likely could be a guy here, but Scott, I do understand not wanting to hold 2 tight ends this early in the season.
And I just have one request to the Twitter sphere. The asking a question where a number is the answer and showing likely and his jersey number as a picture. That's enough.
I think it was funny. I liked it. Actually.
I think it's funny too, but it's been done so many times. That's all I'm saying. Sorry, I don't mean to be a Debbie Downer.
All good. No, all good.
My own little pet peeve. I post stupid crap all the time. So I'm not one to talk.
Nate, any final thoughts on likely here? We've kind of talked about him quite a bit this preseason already.
I mean, I like the talent. I just don't. I can't justify rostering him right now. Like, I've got my tight ends in my leagues, and I feel like if he does pop off, he's going to be around in week 2 or week 3 because it probably won't be week 1. I mean, it's hard to be excited about anything outside of Mark Andrews and Rashad Bateman, honestly, in this offense, just because they're going to be such a run-heavy team. Mm-hmm. Likely could pop off, though. It could happen. I'm not spending the capital on him now to get him. If other people are excited about him, they can have him.
Well, Scott, why don't you bring us home with your in the scope target here for week 1? A reminder, guys, we've hit some really good ones in the past. We've had Myles Gaskin back in 2020 when he went off. Way back when we first started, actually, it wasn't even this podcast. It was the Bottom Line Fantasy, the kind of this podcast predecessor. And I called George Kittle that year. So this is kind of a segment near and dear to my heart. Scott, can you do it with your week 1 target here?
So I'm going to insert a headline in here, even though we don't do that, because I sent out a tweet earlier about this. And so the headline is, there is still a Pierce that is a very good value, but it ain't Damian. And I'm talking about Alec Pierce, the 2nd round wide receiver drafted by the Indianapolis Colts. So this is somebody I wasn't really too high on him as the offseason wore on, as the draft wore on, but lately I've looked a little bit farther into it. I mean, his combine measurements speak for themselves, much like Christian Watson. Is that right? Yeah. He was, he had the top relative athletic score. He had the top vertical jump in this draft class, and he was 4.41 40 time, and he's 6'3", 210. So he's a big, fast, explosive receiver. He just, much like the Green Bay Packers rookie, might be a little bit raw. However, he has even though his advanced metrics across his college statistics, they don't jump off the page at you, but there are more of them than with Christian Watson. So I think he's a little bit more ready for the NFL. And that wide receiver 2 opposite of Michael Pittman Jr. in Indianapolis is wide open right now. I think Paris Campbell, I like the talent with Paris Campbell, but I think he'll be more of a slot guy, and he hasn't been able to stay healthy. I think Alec Pierce, he's just sitting there. He's like 15% owned. He's a rookie. He's got 2nd round draft capital. Like, they spent a 2nd round pick on him. And like I said, tall, fast, Matt Ryan's a huge upgrade over Carson Wentz with that offense. Marcus Bradley, the offensive coordinator, they were pretty close to a 50-50 split run pass. So they are a fairly run heavy team. I think that skews a little bit more towards passing with a better quarterback in Matt Ryan. But I'm not talking about a league winner here. I'm talking about a guy, get him now, because I think he could easily score a touchdown in week 1. And the Colts have one of the best, according to the preseason fantasy matchup stuff I spent the last month on. Colts have one of the best schedules for fantasy wide receivers. First month, they're top 2 over the course of the season. They're top 4 as far as, average projected points given up to fantasy receivers. So I just think he's a guy, get him now while you can, if you got that spot.
And I agree with Scott. Like, he might be someone worth throwing in a DFS lineup this week as well, throwing in an anytime touchdown scorer. They're playing the Houston Texans here in week 1.
Texans, yep.
Texans don't have a great secondary. They did add Derek Stingley Jr. However, Stingley Jr. has not played a lot of football the last couple of years, despite being a top 10 NFL pick. So Derek Stingley Jr., he could change the face of the Texans secondary. But right now in week 1, I like Alex Pierce. I think Alec Pierce could be a sneaky play this week and a guy moving forward. Scott, I really like this pick for you.
Yeah, I mean, I just think he's a guy to pick up as a beat the waiver. And then, I mean, 5 of their first 7 games are against Jacksonville, Houston, and Tennessee. Obviously, those teams are in their division.
Yes, sir.
They all also happen to be pretty poor against receivers, fantasy-wise. At least that's what I'm projecting.
Yes,
so
sir.
I just think I just think he gets overlooked. Second-round draft capital is not something to overlook. So I just need to see if I'm going to practice what I preach with my teams.
Yep. Guys, we will be back on Friday, Nate and I, 1:30 p.m. Eastern time. That is our second show of the week. Brand new. We want to bring you guys more content, more fantasy football advice this year. Until then, we have a game on Thursday. Nate, Scott, any general advice as we head into Thursday's game? And mine would be, one, like just the simple, if you have people playing on Thursday night, get them out of your flex spot. And second, just enjoy the night. I mean, I know I'm going to have betting implications on this. I'm going to have fantasy implications, probably some DFS implications on Thursday night's game. But let's just enjoy it. Let's remember we have waited so long for football to be back. And it's back, baby.
Yeah, dude, football is back. Sit down, enjoy the game. Don't check your phone. Don't look at your fantasy lineups.
You're not going to
just watch the Bills and the Rams play. They're going to put up like 50 points apiece. It's going to be like that Rams-Chiefs game. It's ridiculous. It's like whoever scores the last touchdown. So I'm going to sit on the couch with the beer.
I'm going to love it. Yeah. I mean, as we should know by now, you're not going to win or lose your week or your season on week 1 Thursday night. Yeah. So I'm speaking from personal experience. I, for a long time in fantasy football, am glued to every 10th of a point my team scores. I can't do that anymore because I'm in, too many leagues to be able to do that. But I've really worked, especially the Thursday night games. Just enjoy the game. We've all been craving football. A lot of people got some of their fix in the preseason. I personally did not. So I am very, very much looking forward to Thursday night.
Plus, guys, remember, this is probably the only good Thursday night football game we're going to get all season.
Oh, no.
We're still going to watch it.
No.
What are you talking about?
Amazon, I don't know if you've looked at the Thursday night football schedule, Nate, but it is awesome. They redid Amazon.
Did they get a longer break between games?
It's just awesome. Man.
I'm sure the teams are good. We'll see. My issue's always been the quality of play because of the short 4-day break. But we'll see. Maybe that changes.
That's true. That could be true.
So,
that could be true.
We got
Herbie. Kirk Herbstreit, Thursday night football. I'm excited for him and Al Michaels.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I'm absolutely jacked up for this season, fellas. If this is you guys' first time over here at the In Between Media YouTube channel, we have content like this coming out 7 days a week between here and our website, inbetweenmedia.com. Please hit that subscribe button. Keep up to date with what we have coming your way this season. Nate and I will be back at 1:30 p.m. Eastern time on Friday afternoon. We're going to talk Thursday night football. We're going to talk start sits heading into the weekend. And then Sunday morning, I'll be back here with Connor Coughlin. We're going to be talking betting, DFS, and everything in between. But until then, guys, keep it in between, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for tuning in. Your destination for both some feel-good lifestyle advice and some fantasy football advice.